through there twice, pull the knot down, and then we've got a sliding loop knot. All you do, take your boilie, and then just gently ease the loop down over the boilie, so it's in the centre of the boilie, going around all around the centre. It's quite a small little pop-up, this one. But you can use it with, you know, you can use this rig with plastic corn, pop-up plastic corn, pop-up maize, or pop-ups that, you know, the bait you're using. Take off the tag end, blob it down a little bit, and then you're ready to tie on. But before we tie that on, what I generally do with this rig is put it through the steaming process. And I'll do that before we put the bait on, and we'll show you how. Okay, right, well basically that's the finished rig. All we're gonna go put it through now is the steaming process. Be careful, I mean, that's why I'm using 2 baiting needles. Over steam, obvious reasons, you're gonna burn yourself. So we're gonna actually just steam the main part, just so you end up with a lovely stiff kick out section that's gonna kick away from the lead, and then just hold it there, nice and tight. You notice I've still got tension on that, just so you get a perfectly straight hook link. That should be dry enough now. You can see how straight that is and how, you know, I can pick that up. That's as stiff as you're gonna get. And that's why the power stiff is so good. It does exactly what it's supposed to do. This part is gonna be using the rig cone again, because what we're gonna do is create like a Withy style, just a gentle curve in it. And if you'll notice, I'm gonna put this one further up the rig cone than I did the last rig. And then, as you can see from that, and all we're going to do is hold that over the steam. Don't pull the loop too hard, because we want that to still remain as a loop. And then once that's dried out, we'll leave that to set, just for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, whatever you like. But as long as it sets, we've got a nice little gentle curve, as you can see. That's basically as it's going to sit in the water once we put the bait on. We're going to tie that onto the little ring of the D. It's not too fiddly once you've done a few. It's like anything, you know, if you're starting out carp angling, these are the rigs that the main guys use to catch these big fish. So it's worth, you know, upping your game, learning to tie a few of the complicated rigs, and you will outwit the big carp. Yet again, just a little tiny blob on the. Be careful not to affect the power stiff or get the flame on the power stiff. The only thing to put on that, because it's a pop-up, a little bit of putty. You can mould the putty round the knot that's going down on the upright part of the rig. So a little tiny piece of putty. You'll find that the swivel helps keep the bait down anyway, keeps the rig down. Mould it round the knot, and that is ready to cast out. And that will catch you an awful lot of big fish, and that's how it will sit in the water. But you notice how that rig will turn 360, because we've done the loop with the ring swivel. Whatever way the carp touches, because we've put the Withy style sort of bend in it, it will always flip round in the bottom lip, and then you can see how stiff the power stiff is. There's no way that fish is going to deal with that. They won't be able to eject it. It'll catch an awful lot of fish. Like I say, it's nothing new. It's been around for quite a while, and there's quite a few rigs that are formulated around that, like the chod rig. I'd rather use this rig that has got that element of travel rather than a chod that is stuck onto, you know. There's no question the chod works, but I just think this one for me is more my style of rig, and it'll catch an awful lot of carp. Hope that one helps.
So fluorocarbons then, guys, vital part of the carp angler's armoury nowadays. Very, very popular, in vogue if you want to call it. But
yeah, I'd say so, Pete. You know, there's certainly, you know, latter part of autumn into winter, the lakes are clearing up. You want to be as invisible as an angler as you can be, especially when the fish are slowing down. Fluorocarbon gives you that that edge. It sinks down. You're not over massive weed beds. You know, everything's flat on the bottom. So, you know, the fish quite often circle around looking for lines. You got a tight line going to your lead. A fluorocarbon, you can ease it off. It will sink down. The beauty with the Pure Power is that we've actually designed a fluorocarbon that is as soft as any mono, and it will cast as far as most monos. I mean, the first time out on this particular thing, I used 16 pound. It's quite ironic, really. We're actually sat in the swim, the very same swim I caught the Isle of Wight record, and I had it on all 3 rods. And on this particular lake, I had 3 upper 20s, 3 30s, and the 48.5, which was, you know, some kind of test for me on a line. Yeah, I was pretty pleased with that, and it was remarkable. It probably wasn't the right lake to have it on because how far that will cast, but I was using it in a different scenario. I was sinking it off. I was almost backleading, but I still had, within sort of the fish moving off 2 foot, indication. And that was vital, and I think that was key. And all those fish, bar one, came in the daytime.
Visual part of angling really comes into play.
Well, you know, I know that the owner of this particular lake said that they're really spooked out if they hear human beings, hear the footsteps, I don't think they knew we were here. Well, I was here. You know, once I was cast in, let it all sort of sink down to the bottom, and it did exactly what it was supposed to. And there's a sort of a gravel bar over there, and it was, you know, all the fish were fighting over the top of it, up against the reeds, and I didn't have any troubles whatsoever. Performed amicably, and it landed me an Isle of Wight record.
Yeah, I think the main advantage is, I mean, fluorocarbon by its nature, nothing affects it, does it? You know, so, you know, a lot of makes of fluorocarbon. It's wiry when you put it on your reel, and it's wiry 6 months later. You know, you know, because of the softening process, it's really nice to use straight away, isn't it? You know,
it feels just like a mono.
Yeah. I mean, the nice part of being a consultant with Ultima is that they actually listen. We listen to the public. We listen to what people want. We know hopefully what people want, and we're looking for it for ourselves. And they tend to incorporate that into a product. So not only is it in white, it doesn't just come in white, a clear finish. We've done it in the green as well, because some people prefer that colour. I don't know of another fluorocarbon.
There's not, I don't think.
So there you go. So we were the first people to actually incorporate a dye into fluorocarbon, and you know, most lake beds have an element of green, brown, and that, once that's lead on the bottom, the fish don't know it's there. It's just an awesome line, like the hook links. I mean, obviously, I make most of my fishing, I'd say, is done with fluorocarbon hook links. I use the power link in 15 and 18. Incorporated with that, I don't even use a leader, so it's straight to the lead. And you know, in the thicker variety, I have no problems with flicking scales off, or people talk about that. I haven't ever had a problem with that. Just literally a lead clip. When you put that in the water, all you can see is the lead.
Do you find knots? You have to use different knots, or is
I use the twice through the eye, 5-turn grinner.
Right. Okay.
And it's the same as you would do with a normal braid.
Yeah.
I haven't had any problems.
No.
I used to. I'm not, sounding like an Ultima flagship here, but. Other manufacturers that I've used in the past, I've had problems with, like, it snapping, polymers going. Some of it was to do with the hooks we used to start with. If you don't use an out-turned eye, that took me about 1.5 years to work that out. But I haven't had any problems at all with knot strength. So no, but I do use it in the 15 and the 18, and the 18 is still supple enough to use it as
well, I know you've said to me before it's almost braid-like. The way it operates. I mean, that's with the basic.
That's 15. It's really floppy, which is unusual for fluorocarbon. Fluorocarbons of past, they'll snap, but this stuff just doesn't snap. It's a really good fluorocarbon. I don't ever see fluorocarbon disappearing from the carp world. I see it getting stronger and stronger.
Well, the other thing with Pure Power is the fact that the softening process has made it into a much more castable line as well. So, I mean, through testing, Mark Hutchinson, one of our consultants, has cast over 170 yards with a baited rig.
That's the 16 pound.
16 pound fluorocarbon, which is unbelievable.
We're not saying you're going to cast that far, because no one probably will. But that's with a fluorocarbon. That was 16 pound, straight through, no leaders. That was bang straight through. So if you take the average angler, he's going to be able to cast sort of ton 20, ton 10. with a fluorocarbon and fish happily and confident. That's what fluorocarbon will do for you. It'll just give you that extra key factor in confidence, you know.
I think the other aspect it gives you is that you do tend to fish slack lines at shorter distances. And if you see a fish roll or you see a fish top out and you want to punch a lead at it, which has been the result in many, many big fish being caught, if you've got the fluorocarbons of old, you wouldn't be able to reach. Whereas with this,
well, you get the old frapping around the rod, and you know, I have used them and you know, steered away from them until, you know, obviously then power carp come out, fluorocarbon coated, a line that casts, could sink. But this stuff will actually sink like a brick. So you can use it as a hook link as well, which I've done in the 16 variety. Used it with the basic complicated rig, and it works. It's brilliant, you know. But obviously, be choosy when you're choosing your fluorocarbon. Choose the right strain. It's not cheap, but it does a job that, you know, especially in the, like you say, through autumn and winter, it'll help you catch more fish.
definitely.
This is the Withy pool rig. This is probably what made me as synonymous in carp angling as I am. Come up with this rig. Well, I mean, I initially was using the bent hook rig back in the late 80s, probably 87. It was Mr. Pete Wilson of Ultima who actually showed me the bent hook riggers when I was about 17. Started using it, catching a lot of fish. It did a lot of fish damage. As a syndicate, we voted it out. It just wasn't a considerate carp rig. It caught a lot of fish, but it was damaging fish. So for 2 years, there's a bit of a lull in Withy because it was, you know, it was such a devastating rig. I started messing around, and I've always been into rigs, messing around with different variants. Initially, I came up with the ring slid all the way around there. We didn't have shrink tube in those days, and I was literally fixing up a float stop and doing a round circle of soft tubing, and it was sliding up around there. It was catching, but it was catching in various places, and I had a couple that were outside the mouth. So something had to be, you know, it had to be changed. I knew it was on the same principle as the bent hook, and it was obviously, you can see that, it's a nice bend in the hook. This is where people get confused with the Withy. It bends out straight. So it's, you know, once it's hooked, it's done its job. If you know, playing a fish and it gets in the weed, that, just because of the shape of the tubing, it actually grips the bottom lip. So if you do slacken off to it, whatever, it's one of those rigs that tends to stay in the fish's mouth more than just a hook on its own. It's great for European angling, absolutely pucker for, you know, for all you guys fishing these big pits with the big fish, because it creates a big hook. You can close that up a little bit. I've seen people use longer lengths of tubing and make them flatter, so it lays along the bottom, and literally just, you know, they're using it with a stiff rig. So it's still the Withy pool rig, but in a different form, just a lot more tubing and a lot flatter along the bottom. But this is how I use it. I always use it with a pop-up primarily. You know, 1988 was when it was conceived, and you know, I suppose I've got to be quite flattered that it's still used today as one of the most well-known pop-up rigs. I'm using it with the braid from Ultima. That's how I'd always use it, normally with a braid. You can use it, you know, like with the fluorocarbon, you can have a semi-stiff rig, but just whip on the braid onto that. But I tend to use it braid only. I always use it at 7 inches. That's the best. I did a lot of testing in the late 80s, early 90s, and I found the 7 inches was the ultimate, you know, for fish for 25 plus to 30. That seemed to be the ultimate flip and turn, a little bit of movement on it, and I was using it with a helicopter rig. And as I say, using it with the Ultima braid, and I will show you just quickly how we tie this. A lot of people are confused with how this rig, they look at it and they think, oh God, it's too confusing. Obviously, you've seen how to tie on a 4-turn, 5-turn grinner knot. Literally, I'm just using it straight onto the hook. I'm using the GLT hooks, the penetrators, because that was one of the original hooks. It was out in those days that I used with this rig. Literally, thread on 1 inch of the tubing, slide it down, and put probably 5 mil over the eye of the hook. And it secures on there nice and tight. What I find with some of the stiffer shrink tubes is that once you've put this on the Withy rig, it moves about even after you've steamed it. This stuff is quite tight and it shrinks to half the size. So literally that's the start of the Withy rig. And the next thing I do is the steaming. And this is probably the bit that most people get wrong. Whilst we're waiting for the kettle to boil, I'll move on, and it's quite important, it's vital that you use it with an oval ring. Because of the way the bait sits, if you use a round ring and you tie it on, the bait, it makes the hook sit at a slight angle. It's not what you want. You want it to, I'll show you in a sec how you want the hook to sit. We're just using a little tiny float stop, or whatever stop you can get your hands on, but sometimes, you know, it pays to glue this round. A lot of people fish it up near the top. I've never found it works better just on the edge of the bend. As it starts to bend, you've got an element of travel. You don't want it too far up, because what I've found is, depending on what hook you use, and if you hook the fish and your float stops up there, the hook won't penetrate into the mouth, so you're playing the whole fish, you're playing on the bend of the hook, and I've had them snap where that has slid round. So that is a key element to how the rig works. You need it further around there, and as you can see from that particular setup, you can see where it is. The hook then can drop. It's just perfect. And if I can show you that way, the way the hook sits, this is in conjunction with using it with an oval ring. I slide the knot over, slightly over to one side, and that makes the ring sit perpendicular to the hook, and that's quite critical. It's very critical, because with a round ring, it sits like that. It's not a good presentation. That's exactly how you want to tie it. Just slide in the knot over. It's literally, you've got your power braid straight to the hook, 1 inch of tubing, a ring and a stop. It's very, very simple. Always when you're putting over steam, especially young kids, if you're going to be steaming up links like this, always try and use some pliers. Don't put your hands anywhere near the steam. So what we'll do, just hold it straight, heat up the shrink tube, and literally just bend it round till I know that's the angle that I want. It's literally just a nice curved seed, and that is the Withy rig. All you've got to do, tie your pop-up on, put your split shot on to balance it. I tend to use it as a critically balanced bait. You can use it as a bottom bait, it still works. A lot of people have asked me that, and when it got hard at Withy, after they'd been caned for about 4 years, I started using it with a bottom bait, and it caught me as many fish. So that's it. That's the Withy pool rig. And as I say, whether it's in England, whether it's abroad, Carp are doing you all the time, and they are, no question about it. Like I say, going back to that hermit lead, it outfished this rig at once, but there's not many other rigs that I know that this will get outfished on. This is the one. If you're fishing a pop-up rig, it's probably the ultimate. So that's as far as the Withy pool rig goes. That's how I use it. That's how it was concepted in 1988, and it's still going to this day as one of the world's most famous pop-up rigs. Try it. You'll find it's good. Okay, a rig I'd like to demonstrate on how to tie. It's a rig that I've used for probably the last 8 years, maybe 7, since the advent of fluorocarbon. I'm going to be doing it with the Power Link, which is made in-house by Ultima. They've softened it. It's the next level on. It's ideal for a hook link. I like the bait to curl round, have a little element of travel, and to do it with fluorocarbon is fantastic, and this product offers you that facility. I'll show you what I normally do. I normally take off about 14 inches, because we're doing turns around the hook link gets shorter and shorter. We're going to tie a simple overhand knot. That is just literally to secure the buoy in place. As you can see, just from that is a simple overhand loop, and we're going to cut off the tag end and secure the buoy on. So we're just going to put the buoy through, secure it with a buoy stop. The only hook I use now with any type of fluorocarbon is the stiff riggers, the ESP stiff riggers. Corda do the choddy, anything with an outturned eye. But on this particular rig, because of the way the eye is angled for the chod rigs, try and straighten it back a bit. It's still got a slightly outturned eye, but too much and the hook doesn't sit. You'll see this is all about the way the hook sits aggressively towards in conjunction with the buoy. So the first thing you do is take the power link, poke it through the back of the eye, and then slide the hook down into position. And what I normally do is I just push it down so it just passes the top of the buoy. And that's quite critical. You don't want it too close, because there's no travel on the hair. The hair still, because this material is quite soft, the hair actually, I love the way the hair separates once the carp takes it in. So what we're doing is doing 3 turns around the top of the hook. And then, just by that, I'm letting the boilie go, and then I'm taking the rest of the turns around the other side of the hair, and then I normally do about 6 turns, and then back through. This is quite critical, not back through the the face of the eye, but through the back of the eye again. And then that is literally the rig done. And as I said, it's the type of rig, if you turn up and you haven't got a rig tied, I've called it, years and years ago, I called it the basic complicated rig, because it is very, very basic to make, but it's complicated in the way that the hook sits. And once we've done that, we bend the eye out, and if you can see how aggressively that hook sits. I've caught over 100 English 30s on this rig alone. So I know it works for big fish. I've caught a lot of other fish on it, but it's a big fish rig. It can't get any simpler than that. But just the way that the hook sits, it literally takes hold normally in the scissors. That's where you'll get your hook hold. Like I say, a softer material, you can design a rig to hook straight bang in the centre of the bottom lip, but this isn't what it's about. Okay, yeah, I'll say a little trick you can do. Because you've tied this, you've gone fishing, you've tied this basically when you've arrived, you can either thread the bag with the pellets. If you're fishing in silkweed or, sort of detritus bottom, you can literally thread on a little bag, pull the hook through. I would normally use the PVA that's a little bit more, this one is not perfect, but you can pull the hook through and you've got literally your hook is covered by the PVA bag, so you can cast that onto silkweed, any kind of, sort of mucky area really that you don't want to cast a single hook bait out onto. And the fluorocarbon, it's perfect. It sinks to all the contours. You can see how supple that is. It will sink to any contours and disappear literally during the daytime, and it definitely upped my catch rate. Well, one of my favourite methods, and this is probably the one that's caught me more big fish than any other method to put on to the basic complicated rig, is literally, it's quite simple, a stringer of 5 boilies. If I was using a double boilie, I'd use seven baits, but this is how it works. I've called this one like the round stringer, and I used it back in the 80s when I was using these massive boilies, and I didn't know whether to put any spares out, so I was putting small baits around the big one. Literally what we're doing, you take your hook bait, you're tying on your stringer straight onto the bottom of the hook. I normally secure it twice because, PVA string can slip. You don't want that. And what we're doing now is we're just going to slide the knot up to the top of where we've knotted the fluorocarbon, and literally